Martin, let me start with you. Turing says that discounts with hospitals could reach as much as 50%. This comes after a 5,000% price increase. So we're still talking about a very expensive drug at the end of the day. How does this potential discount make the drug Daraprim more affordable?
It's always been affordable.
It's always been affordable after the 5,000% increase and the 50% discount?
I've been on Bloomberg before to explain this, yes.
Can you explain it again?
No. I gave voluminous amounts of interviews on this topic. Daraprim is affordable to every customer that needs it. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself.
So why do you feel then the outcry happened so much? If it was affordable and no one had to pay a lot, why did you feel then that you got so much heat and we had a lot of, and that sort of started the drug pricing conversation in Washington as well as with Hillary Clinton's campaign?
Well, I think that hospital customers needed a lower price. That's why we released the news that we're releasing. But customers who can get the product through pharmacies have no issue affording it.
You know, Martin, I actually spoke to a hospital that buys your drug, Emory University down in Atlanta, and they see a lot of these toxoplasmosis patients. And they said last year, you know, before you guys owned the drug, that they were spending about $18,000 a year to stock, 14 bottles, which is about the volume that they need to do these types of acute cases where this is taken care of. And that they'd budgeted for this year about, I believe, a little over $1 million because of the price increase. That's obviously going to come down with some of the discounts that you guys are going to be offering. But from talking to other hospitals as well, I mean, it seems like these guys were already negotiating some discounts from the list price through their purchasers or through their supply power already. How is the discount? I mean, who's going to end up getting these discounts? How much are they actually going to be? I mean, you have a comment here in the press release that we tried to get some information from your company yesterday and weren't able to, about a reduction in Daraprim's list price would not translate into a benefit for patients. I guess I'm struggling to understand exactly who is going to get these discounts, or if this is just going to be hospitals attempting to negotiate against you guys.
Yeah, hospitals will get the discounts. High-volume hospitals will be able to get discounts of up to 50% so that the burden of a high-cost bottle will be less.
Mm-hmm. And what about other hospitals? Necessarily, maybe they were only seeing a handful of patients a year, smaller clinics,
sure,
patients, cancer patients.
Toxoplasmosis is a very rare disease, as you know. So the ability for hospitals to stock a 100-count bottle is rather expensive. So we've made a 30-count bottle that'll be a lot more affordable, obviously. So less pills, less price. And so that'll be helpful for these patients.
Mm-hmm. How many hospitals have you been talking to that might sign up for this?
I think we're trying to focus on the top 800 hospitals in the country, and then we'll go to the next tier after that.
Well, you've also said that no patient needing Daraprim would ever be denied access. How do you ensure that?
We insure it the same way every other drug company does. 60% of our drug is given away for $1. I've said this many, many times in the media.
Yeah, no, and to your credit, you did explain this in the release, and you have said it, and you talk about the patient access programs, talk to physicians who give you guys credit for some of the things you've been doing there. But it's also, I guess it begs the question of, are commercial payers going to get this? People who have this condition and need it are getting reimbursed at it with a commercial payer. Are they going to have access to these discounts, or is this just so hospitals can stock more easily?
I'm not even sure I understand your question. The goal of our system is that no patient's left behind. 60% of our drug is given away for $1. Anyone who can't afford our drug is eligible for a patient copay assistance program and other sorts of safety nets. And this further price reduction will help even more for hospitals who have difficulty stocking a large amount of capital expenditure.
Right, that's helpful for a patient up front, but when you're dealing with a patient who's paying premiums and then their insurance company is having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for this drug, that affects what that patient and other patients are going to pay in premiums down the line.
I think you're dead wrong. Daraprim is one of the smallest drugs in the pharmaceutical market.
It is a small drug, but there is every dollar going into the system. It has an effect on what patients pay in premiums.
No, that's not true at all. It's a $500 billion system.
So you guys are just
such a small drug; it doesn't affect the system at all.
Right. So I guess I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. Because it's such a small drug, you guys can do this, and who cares? You guys it's just icing on the system that you guys are taking.
I just think you have to take into perspective the reality of the situation, which sounds like you're distorting it, because this is a drug that's so tiny, its changes won't impact the system.
So what if everybody did what you guys are doing now?
That's not possible, given the other safety nets the government's created, such as generic drugs.
Martin, in your experience, what is the most effective way of keeping patients' out-of-pocket expenses low?
Insurance.
Insurance under the way it is now,
yeah.
Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, absolutely. Employer insurance renders copay assistance at a limited price, and then Affordable Care Act renders copays at extremely low prices. No one can't afford Daraprim, for instance.
Let's move to something else that came out in the news today, that, of course, you and some other investors bought a 70% stake in Calabos. that was kind of left for dead. I mean, it seemed like the drugs really weren't working. People didn't really think there was a lot of promise in it. What did you see in that company that you feel like other people were missing?
Yeah, so we acquired a majority of Calobios, which is a publicly traded company. The main asset of the company is a drug called Lenzilumab, which is a potential drug for chronic myelomonocytic leukemia. The trial is starting right now, actually, so we're really excited to see that, and hopefully the patients who have this really, really awful, terrible, fatal disease will get better, and we'll know in Q1 or Q2 if our trial works.
What do you feel like you saw that other people didn't right now? Because it feels like they've been struggling for a while. There are also many different ways that you could have maybe invested in the company. Maybe you could have waited till they went into bankruptcy, picked off their drug, just buy their product. Why did you go about it in this specific way?
Well, we couldn't get the company to call us back, which was unusual for a company that needed cash. And we see this a lot in corporate America. There's a lot of irresponsibility especially in healthcare management teams in corporate America. So we went in, we bought the company in the open market ourselves, and named ourselves the new management of the company. And now the company has the cash to do this clinical trial that could be a life-saving drug for cancer patients. The stock market is very inefficient. You know, there are drugs like Pharmaceuticals drug that was given away for $1 million and then sold for $20 billion just a handful of years later. So this happens all the time. You know, I think it'll be a promising drug, but we still have to do the trial and find out.
Well, you plan to operate Turing and Calobios as separate companies, right?
That's right.
Are there no synergies to be had down the road?
Maybe down the road, but right now we're focused on Lenzilumab for CMML and JMML, which are, like I said, 3-year survival of the disease is 20%. Most people don't have a good shot at CMML. There's no FDA-approved drug. Lenzilumab could be what we're looking for.
You guys have about, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about a 70% stake in the company.
70%.
Are you guys trading additionally in that, or acquiring more shares, or disposing of any of those shares at this point?
Yeah, so any trading in that stock would require disclosure within 48 hours. So you'll know if we buy or sell. And also you have to keep in mind that there's Section 16B of the SEC Act states that you cannot sell a stock within 6 months after acquiring more than 10% stake without disgorging the profits to the company. So I don't plan on disgorging the profits to the company.
We can see the enormous pop that happened, obviously, when we saw a lot of volume trade in the stock.
What role do you think shorts might have had in driving up the share price by more than 1,000%?
I don't pay attention to the stock market. My job as the CEO is to make sure that this drug gets developed in both AMML, CMML, and some other rare autoimmune diseases. Has a lot of promise. GlaxoSmithKline recently bought a very similar antibody for $30 million. I was able to buy this antibody for negative $1 million. I got paid to buy it. There was more cash in the company than the price I paid. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to the future of this medicine.
It seems like some of the chatter after the filing came out is that this could be a potential for a reverse merger for you guys to IPO. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I don't see a reason or need to reverse merge Turing. You know, the goal of acquiring Calobios was to buy this antibody, Lenzilumab, which very few people have focused on this drug. You know, no one's asked me about, well, why did you do this? You know, why is this a good asset? Why do you think it's worth so much more than what you paid for? It's not some stock market game or trick. This is about dying patients. This is about a drug that can work for those patients. Turing is fine. Turing is doing great. It can IPO anytime it wants with any bank it wants, and it has unending demand for capital and investment from investors. We're focused on creating value at Calobios through not only Lenzilumab, but I expect that we could announce an acquisition for Calobios to acquire new products as soon as by the end of this year. In fact, we're in talks with 3 separate acquisitions that could create even more value for Calobios.
Would this be for drugs for common diseases, rare diseases?
Probably rare diseases. 2 of them are not yet FDA approved, and 1 of them is FDA approved. So all 3 are progressing rapidly and could be great fits for Calobios.
So when it comes to the commercial prospects of a drug, why is scale not an advantage?
Scale is always an advantage, but at the end of the day, these are 2 separate companies. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to here.
Well, going after, for instance, medicines that treat rare diseases as opposed to medicines that treat common diseases.
Yeah, so obviously we all know companies like Genzyme and Alexion have done remarkably well with rare disease drugs because they're so expensive and they're so rarely used. As I was saying earlier, these aren't the drugs that make up the bulk of pharmaceutical revenue, but they can still be blockbusters, and they're very important for these patients that need these medicines, and they have to be high priced. Otherwise, there's just not enough volume to make up for the revenue, and there's no interest in drug makers to sell these drugs for just a handful of people.
So what did the folks who have previously owned this drug at Calobios, I mean, what did they fail to see or fail to do here, and what was the failure of this company that you all, you know, I mean, be as expansive as you want there, but, you know, why did it fail so badly with them? Why were these guys going out of business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's credibility and trustworthiness. This is a company that tried Lenzilumab in rheumatoid arthritis. They failed. They tried it in asthma. They failed. And so the third attempt, if you ask investors to fund yet another program, it often is not going to be received very well. So I think when we came in with fresh capital and fresh ideas and said we underwrite this, we support this, and investors who have been in my last two companies know my track record is very good, and I think that we'll see success with lenzilumab and CMML.
And you mentioned sort of other potential M&A deals that you see are takeover targets. Do you foresee more money being pumped into M&A versus R&D?
No, so I think R&D is by far the greatest return there is in pharmaceuticals. And I'm doing CalBios not only because it's a great return, but I also want to make sure people know I'm not a one-trick pony. Raising drug prices is certainly a great way to make returns for your investors, but an even better way to make return for your investors is developing novel drugs for very sick patients that don't have any choices, and that's what we're doing with Calo.
So finally, just to wrap things up, for the Democratic presidential candidates who are looking into controversy over pricing of drugs, what would you want to say to them? What do they not understand?
I think they don't understand that people like me have to take huge risks. CalBios needs another $100 million that I'm going to give to it so that we can develop lenzilumab for CMML. People who have CMML have no hope, no choices whatsoever. So this system needs incentives. It needs the ability to say lenzilumab, even though only 2,000 or 3,000 people might take lenzilumab, it has to cost $100,000 or more for me to want to risk that money. Or I'd go invest in oil or something like that. You know, there has to be an incentive for drug makers to do this expensive research. Otherwise, I wouldn't have rescued this company.